Hi, everybody. This week, I want to return to talking about the peak of the waves and its importance. If you really heard me last week, you know the peak is not the point. However, the peak can be really useful. What the peak shows us is what is possible for us if we are willing to grow around the discomfort of disregarding our stories. The peak changes the story without us having to do any work. So let me show you what I mean by that. Go back to some diagrams. Okay, so from last week, we remembered this place. High stress, high mood, what a wonderful time. Really good for getting lots of things done and for visioning. In this state, we are almost at a higher level of consciousness. The dopamine of the peak allows parts of the amygdala to turn down for a bit, so some of our self-imposed limits dissolve. We can see further than we normally can. We have a different perception of ourselves, and thus more becomes possible. However, as I noted last week, the peak is not the point. The peak does not stay, right? So what it is good for is vision. We're high up, we can see far. So the peak is part of the waves as well, right? We're not trying to control it. The waves will always be there. We're just trying to get space. We're trying to be on the board, on top of the water, instead of caught in it. This can be a harder ask of the peak because we want to be in the water at the peak. We kind of believe that we're robbing ourselves of something if we aren't letting ourselves be in the water. So that's just another false voice, but we will only come to know this through actual practice, meaning you really have to want it. So I'm going to go on to explain basically why anyone would. Let's move to another diagram. Okay, so here are the levels of competence. This is a very real and tangible thing at the level of physical independent skills. I'm using it at the metaphysical level of identity. These are levels of how we see ourselves performing at life, whatever lens we're using to judge ourselves at the time. So let me go through this because I just want to point out that all of us are learning at life. And if someone isn't helping you understand that, you can believe that you yourself are the only person who is quote unquote failing, right? So often the move from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence can be harsh. This is when we start to have awareness of ourselves and how we might be different from other people, how our actions might be harmful or whatever, right? It can be a hard shift. The awareness moving from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. And if you don't have someone helping you understand that, this is when we start to build stories around who we are and what we can have and what we deserve, right? Particularly if we have trauma, especially in early childhood, we get a lot of stories. A child's mind is very simple, doesn't really understand more than black and white. So this is where we get caught a lot of times because we don't understand that everyone is learning. Life is basically a giant experiment. So we don't have the wherewithal to make the leap, to practice moving from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. So let me say a little bit more about that. What the peak does is the peak shoots us from conscious incompetence, which is the least comfortable place, to unconscious competence, without having to move on our own through the levels. So it takes us from down here being very insecure to all the way up here being very secure without us having to do any real internal work. It flips us from being worse than in our minds to being better than in our minds. And that's not actually a helpful thing. That is still us being controlled by the waves. It still aligns with the misunderstanding that the peak is the point. It keeps us chasing the peak and freaking out in the valleys, which wastes a lot of energy. It doesn't get us the long-term stability of identity, which is real security or peace of mind, right? It doesn't get us here. So as the peak calms down, the dopamine goes away, the amygdala turns back on, and our perception of ourself changes again. Those self-limiting beliefs that went away while we were peaking seem real again. Thoughts about who we are and what we think we deserve come back. So we can return to feeling less than and insecure all over again. However, If that vision or version of ourselves at the peak is really worth the work, if we really want it, we can use the practice of grounding to get us through the discomfort of conscious incompetence, which is very uncomfortable, to conscious competence, which is where security lives. In truth, it is really only a matter of perception, but perception is one of the hardest things to get out from under because it seems very real, and we are the only ones who can go in there and change it. To change self-perception, we have to leap first, which we really don't like, and with which we may not have a lot of practice. So here's where we start to cling to the stories of like, yeah, maybe sure that worked for you, but let me tell you all of the reasons why I'm the exception. We really do have to have faith in the net. We have to practice first in order to change our perception. It doesn't work the other way around. It will never feel safe to leap. And that's kind of the point. That very thing is what builds our muscle of security, doing the very courageous work of leaping and proving to ourselves that we are worth more than the story, which every single one of us is. It is only through slow and steady practice that we will be able to make long-term change to our perception of ourselves. When we come to know through observing the effect of disregarding the story in real life that we are already competent, whole, and secure on the inside, that we can stop flip-flopping between better than and less than, and we start to become stable, steady, and secure on the outside. This place is the line of peace, right? Peace is the point. The peak is not the point. So I want to add a small caveat here about psychedelics. Many of you know I consider MDMA therapy to have saved my life, that I use psychedelics therapeutically myself and with about half of my clients. Psychedelics do not jump us over the work of practice, believe me, but when used correctly, they can greatly speed up the process. This is one of the reasons they are so profound to many people and why it feels like 10 years of therapy in one go. They can also have unintended consequences, and they are not a silver bullet, and they will get a video series of their own. But it feels unfair not to mention them here because they have been so meaningful to this particular topic. And the only thing I've seen that truly synergizes with what I'm talking about here, proving to ourselves that we are worth more than the story, which is the most grounding and stabilizing thing. So from that place, from the grounded place, the peak starts to become more fun because it's divided from being a reflection of us. It's just part of the waves, which are always coming and going. This is the work of long-term change. The work is not clinging to any particular peak. In fact, if we do that, we'll never have the chance to get any farther. From the grounded place, there are no limits. We can go as far as we can go. There is nothing holding us back and nothing pressuring us forward. We can start to practice walking at our own pace, making choices out of desire rather than fear or need. This is how we come to know and trust our own inner guidance. More than anything, and this is what I want deeply for our world and why I do what I do. All of this will make our interactions healthier and will make our future a better place to be together. Thank you for your time. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be peaceful and well. And I will see you next week.